Okay, good morning, friends. Welcome back after the festival break. I hope all of you enjoyed your break and have come back relaxed, rejuvenated, and fully charged. Okay. Uh, just before we went on our holidays, I had shared with you on MS Teams a few pages of handwritten notes on review of fluid mechanics, and I had requested you to go through them because those concepts are very important when we come to forced convection or even natural convection. The concepts of fluid mechanics, especially that of viscous flow, will be referred to time and again because convection is heat transfer due to bulk movement of the fluid. So, therefore, fluid mechanics is kind of intimately related to convective heat transfer. Okay, so I hope you have gone through that. What I will do is today I will I'll use this 1 hour to just skim through the important salient points of those handwritten notes. But before that, assuming that you have already gone through or skimmed through it, let me ask you that after going through these, are there some concepts that you would like me to focus on explicitly? Something that you don't remember or you had forgotten and it did not come back to you immediately? Is there something from those notes that you would like me to cover more details?
So the order analysis while deriving the
Or
boundary layer.
order of magnitude analysis. Okay, yeah, okay, good. Anyone else? Okay, so let me start with
So
that.
Moody charts also.
Moody charts. Okay, take it. Sure. All right, so let me start sharing my screen. I will just refer to those notes itself. By the way, was my handwriting okay? Legible? Or was it a struggle to understand?
So it was fine.
It's fine. Problem is, when of course, yeah, school life, even here during exams, etc. Okay, student life, we were used to writing. Uh, these days, we write less, type more, and everybody's handwriting has suffered. Mine especially, and I think most of my friends also. When I ask them, the other thing is we cannot write for a long time. Our hands start paining because these muscles are not used regularly. I don't think I would be able to write continuously for more than an hour now. Whereas 2 3 hour exams in the same day with a half an hour break was regular affair in our school lives, right? Okay, sorry. So let's come back to this and a review of fluid mechanics. As you know, uh, the governing equations in fluid mechanics. When we discussed about fluid mechanics, there were two equations that we had to think of. One is conservation of mass, which we call the continuity equation, and the other is conservation of momentum or force balance, which is pretty much Newton's second law applied to fluid motion. Okay, and those equations, those force balance equations, with in the final form, were known as other momentum equations, which we also call the Navier-Stokes equations. Okay, Navier and Stokes, they are pioneers of fluid mechanics, especially viscous flow. Uh, and Stokes relations like tau is equal to mu du dy, right? Viscosity times the gradient of the velocity is the shear force. So those Stokes relations are also applied, okay, and for us to get the Navier-Stokes equation. Okay, someone's initials TV. That's what I can see. Please put your microphones on mute unless you are speaking. Okay. All right. So coming back to this, the continuity equation is simple, easy to remember. It is del dot u equal to 0, where u is, that's a vectorial form. And in simple 2D, it becomes del u del x plus del u del y equals to 0. Okay. Now there is a del u del t as well at the beginning, but no, here actually there isn't. So del u del x plus del u del y equals to 0. That is the continuity equation coming straight away from conservation of mass. So what it essentially means is the gradient of the velocity in the x direction is equal to the gradient of the velocity in the y direction minus. Okay. All right. So the two momentum equations in Cartesian coordinates in the two directions, which is basically the Navier-Stokes equations in 2D, is given here. Okay, I'm not going through these details. You have already read through them. In the most generic form, the transient term, the time-dependent term, del u del t or del v del t will also be there. In steady state, those terms go to 0. Okay, so u del x plus v del u del y equals to minus 1 over rho del p del x plus mu by rho. So you know I've been using it for so many years, so I have memorized it. You don't need to immediately, but I think with repeated use, it will also come, it will basically get imbibed in your psyche. Okay. But what is important to understand is what are these terms? Okay. Definitely, if you go back to your fluid mechanics notes, you will go through the derivations, which I'm not going through here, going to go through here. But the terms essentially on the left-hand side is the net outflow of momentum from a small elemental area at x and y. Okay. So that's the net outflow of momentum. Net outflow, net, okay, which is out minus in. And that has to sum up, that's Newton's second law, right? Rate of change of momentum is equal to the applied force, externally applied force. So therefore, that has to sum up, that has to be equal to the sum of all the forces acting on that element. So what are those forces? There is a force because there is a variation of pressure. So you have the del P del X, del P del Y. Okay. Then there is a force because of the there is a net force because of the viscous effect. And that is captured by mu del square u del x square plus del square u del y square in the x direction, or del square v del x square plus del square v del y square in the x direction. Sorry, in the y direction. Okay. Now, in addition, there can be an external force like what we call the body force, which I have denoted by capital Fx or capital Fy. For example, it can be buoyancy force. Okay, if you're thinking about flow in a vertical direction, buoyancy forces may be acting on it. Okay, it can be an external magnetic field, it can be an external electric field. These are all forces acting on that fluid element. So there is this additional force term that will come in. Okay, you will see natural convection, which is density driven flow, that Fy is actually the buoyancy force. Okay, so there are three forces on the right hand side most commonly encountered: the pressure, the pressure forces, the viscous forces, and any other external force. Okay, so that F can encompass a lot of other things. Okay, then these are cylindrical coordinates, etc. You've done that. So let us go into the order of magnitude. Come back to internal flow later. Okay. So we'll start with external flow. External flow can be flow over a body. Okay, it can be flow over this notebook. It can be flow over this whatever this box for my earphones. It can be flow above a cylinder. Okay, a lot of things. So the most common, what is the most aerodynamic friendly profile is known as the aerofoil. This kind of the cross section of an aircraft wing. So here, what happens? You can imagine that the flow, the velocity streamline is going to make its way around. I mean, imagine yourself. This is what probably if we imagine ourselves to be one particle in that fluid stream and think about what happens if we are actually moving. Okay. So I'm going straight and then I suddenly find, oh man, there's an obstruction. So what will I do? I'll try to go past it. Whether I'll go to the right or whether I'll go to the left, that I have to make a judgment. Okay. And I'll make a judgment based on which is easier. Okay. Is the path on the right shorter or is the path on the left shorter? And based on that, I'll make a judgment. So here also the fluid particle does exactly the same thing. Okay. So wherever there's a path of lesser flow resistance, more fluid will go. Wherever there is a path of higher flow resistance, less fluid will grow. Okay. And finally, they meet downstream as shown there. Okay. Now there is a critical concept of boundary layer. Okay. Now the viscosity, what it suggests is when there is flow occurring next to a stationary object, the role of that object, the stationary solid object, wall, surface, is to slow down the fluid, rather stop the fluid. So therefore, if you imagine the first layer of molecules right next to this surface is not going to have any velocity. Okay. Why? Because it's a viscous fluid. That's the viscosity. That's how we define viscosity. Okay. So in other words, this effect, this attempt of the solid to slow down the fluid, that is the viscous effect. Right? Okay, the first layer of molecules doesn't move. What about the next layer of molecules? It would like to move, but you know its neighbor is going to hold it back. Hey, I cannot go, please don't leave me. Okay, something like that. So the next layer will move, but not so freely. And similarly, the layer above that, similarly, the layer above that. Okay. So even though the first layer of molecules have no velocity, the corresponding, the subsequent layers is also going to, quote unquote, feel the effect of the viscous effects. Is going to feel the viscous effects because of the presence of this body in its path. Okay. So the velocity is going to be zero at the wall, and then it's going to slowly increase. And finally, it is going to reach the initial, what we call the value of the free stream velocity. Okay. And beyond that, it is as if nothing has happened. Okay. What I'm trying to say is beyond that, once you reach a certain distance away from this surface, the fluid molecules, you know, at a distance will flow as if they don't even know that this, you know, this disturbance exists. It will flow like inviscid flow. Okay. Again, imagine yourself a large crowd. And this is what I say. The two examples that we can think of is if you go to a railway platform, right? If it's a train that's going to start in 5 minutes, or it has just come and thousands of people come down of that train. Let us say if you're watching from the top, you will see a swarm of people moving in a certain direction, right? So you can imagine the nature of that flow overall, the macro nature of that flow is very similar to flow of a fluid. But each person in that crowd is like a fluid particle. Okay. Now think about it. This whole crowd is moving, and suddenly probably there is a newspaper stall in the middle of the platform. What will you do? You go straight, and then the people who would face this newspaper stall would like to move around. Okay? They'll kind of make their way around it. But people who are far away, they will continue to move straight, as if they don't even know their motion is unaffected by the presence of this newspaper stall. Okay. So therefore, people around that newspaper stall who had to change their course of motion, you can think of it as they are in a boundary layer, within the boundary layer. Okay. They had to slow down, they had to change their path, etc., etc. Right? Whereas people who are far away, they don't feel that at all. Okay. So that's the concept of the boundary layer. So boundary layer, very simply, is this thin layer next to a solid surface where the velocity of the fluid increases from 0 at the boundary to the free stream velocity. Some people say 99.9% of the free stream velocity. Okay. So beyond the boundary layer, you can imagine the flow velocity to be the same as what it was coming. You know what the upstream velocity was. Okay. So now, if you now consider a thin flat plate, this is what we have just described. There's a bound. If you consider flow across a cylinder, there also there's a boundary layer. Okay. There's something called wake and separation. We'll come to that later. Okay. Now, boundary layer characteristic. This is very important because the first thing is velocity must be 0 at the surface because it's no slip condition. The second, the boundary layer characteristic. This actually becomes a very important question in viva, in interviews, etc. You just say, why? What do you mean by boundary layer flow? The boundary layer is also an assumption. It's not ideal. It's an assumption, but close to reality. The first boundary layer assumption is that the thickness of the boundary layer is very, very small compared to the flow length. In case of a flat plate, it's the length of the plate or the distance from the leading edge. In case of a flow over a cylinder or a sphere, the delta, which is the boundary layer thickness, is very small compared to the overall, in this case, the circumference, pi d, or pi d by 2 in this case. Okay, assuming that the flow splits into half. So we say, well, delta is much, much less than d diameter. So if it's all right. And when I say much, much less, it's like orders of magnitude. If something is 100, the other is probably 1. Okay. The second thing is the velocity normal to the surface is very, very small compared to the one parallel to the surface. So in case of a flat plate, V is much, much less than U. Okay. Now these two are sort of intuitive. The third one is important, and which is where I see many students miss it out, is del U del X is much, much lesser than del U del Y. On the other hand, what it means is the gradient of the velocity in the Y direction, which is normal to the surface, is much larger compared to the velocity gradient in the X direction. Obviously, because the velocity changes from 0 to free stream over a very small thickness of the boundary layer. So del U del Y is high. Del U del X, yeah, if I take a certain Y and move along the streamwise direction, not much of a change. It is 0. It is 0 at any X along the surface. It is U infinity at any X away from the surface. And even somewhere in the middle also, it is like constant along, more or less constant along the X. I'm saying more or less constant because I guess you can, I believe you can guess that I'm talking about laminar flow here. Okay, all right. So these assumptions actually help us in simplifying the momentum equation. Because Navier-Stokes equation is not easy to solve analytically. Only for some simplified cases like flow over a flat plate or flow through a tube, it is possible with certain assumptions to come to a more or less reasonably accurate solution. Okay. So the order of magnitude analysis, I've done it in two ways. So let me take the second one. Okay, this alternative. So here first what I've done is I've non-dimensionalized all the variables. So x prime, I'm calling it x over L. Delta prime, I'm calling delta over L. Delta is the thickness of the boundary layer, which is going to change along the x direction. Please remember, the boundary layer grows like this. Delta is 0 at the leading edge. This is a singularity point. But then look at the way it is increasing, right? So delta at x1 is different from delta at x2, is different from delta at x3. The boundary layer keeps growing, maybe at a low rate, but it keeps growing indefinitely. Okay, all right. And what is the velocity we know? We know u infinity, that's the free stream velocity in the x direction. So I'm going to normalize my local velocities u and v at any point within the boundary layer with respect to the free stream velocity u infinity. Okay. So now, therefore, my Navier-Stokes equation in the x direction becomes u prime del x prime. The del u del x and del u prime del x prime are the same because you have normalized both of them. No, sorry, I'm sorry. They're not the same. U you have normalized by u infinity, and x you have normalized with respect to L. Okay. And here you have again done u prime. It's actually u times u infinity, u by u infinity. Okay. So similarly, v prime, del u prime, del y prime. So you do all these non-dimensionalizations, and you will see finally you will be left with this term. Of course, mu stays. Okay. And rho u infinity L. The rho also comes from the left hand side, u infinity L. Okay. So now let us look into this. What are the different orders of magnitude? So this is what I think the question was. Make a little bit. Yeah, okay. Let us look at the orders of magnitude. The u prime, or rather u, can take the value of u infinity. Yeah, it is 0, but it can take the value of u infinity. So that's why the order of magnitude of u prime is 1. Because u can be comparable, u is comparable to u infinity, the free stream velocity. In fact, it reaches free stream velocity at the edge of the boundary layer. Okay, so that order of magnitude here is 1. X can also reach L. Okay, let us say it's a whatever 100 centimeter, 0.1 meter plate. Okay. So X can be 0.1 meters also at the leading edge. At the halfway, it will be half of that. So X is also comparable to L. Therefore, the order of magnitude of X prime is also 1. So therefore, del u prime by del x prime, that order of magnitude is also 1. Okay. Okay. Order of v prime. Right? What is the order of v prime? We know that v is much less than 2. So definitely it is going to be less than 1. But what is it going to be? That's the next question. So that one we come from here. From the, if you see on the right is a continuity equation, again non-dimensionalized. So del u prime del x prime plus del v prime del y prime equal to 0. Which means del v prime del y prime is of this is scales as del u, or is rather equal to minus del u prime del x prime. Now del u prime del x prime order is 1. Therefore del v prime del y prime also order has to be 1. Okay. So therefore, order of v prime will be the same as order of y prime. Now, what is the order of y prime? Y prime, what is the maximum value it can take? Or y, what is the value of maximum value it can take? Yes, delta, because I'm solving Navier-Stokes equation within the boundary layer only. Beyond the boundary layer, what? U equal to u infinity, isn't it? So therefore, the order of v prime is the same as order of y prime, which is delta prime. Okay. So v prime is order of delta prime. What about del u del y or u prime del y prime? Same thing. U prime order is 1, y prime order is delta prime, sorry. Order is 1 over delta prime. Okay. So what is this? The product order is again 1, because one is delta prime, the other is 1 over delta prime, which is large. And you know del u del y. Remember boundary layer equations, boundary layer assumptions. Del u del y is much larger than del u del x, right? All right. So both the terms on the left hand side is of the order of 1. Similarly, if you go to the right hand side, mu by rho u infinity L, wo chodo, del square u prime del x squared, u order is 1, x prime order is also 1, so x prime square order is also 1. So that is order of magnitude is 1. But here u prime order is 1, y prime order is delta prime, sorry. So therefore this order of magnitude is 1 over delta prime squared. Okay. So one is order of 1, the other is 1 over delta prime squared, which is much larger. So therefore, in comparison, I can drop the first term in the viscous forces, which is del square u del x squared, and retain only the second derivative in the y direction, which is del square u del y squared. Okay. Now this is half done. I know there are questions in your mind that, but what do if I drop something of the order of 1 here, how is it that I'm not dropping the order of 1 magnitude on the left hand side? I'll come to that. Okay. Now let's look at the, so hold on to that question for now. Let's look at the y direction. Do the same thing. Order of u prime 1, order of del v prime del x prime is delta prime. Similarly, v prime is delta prime, del v del y is 1. Okay. Del square v del x squared, delta prime, del square v del y squared, 1 over delta prime. Okay. So now let me come to the next point. If you look in the x direction, this equation, the simplified equation after dropping del square u del x squared, if these have to be balanced, if the inertial terms and the viscous terms have to be balanced, they are balanced, right? That's where Navier-Stokes equation comes from, force balance. If they are balanced, their order of magnitudes have to be same. Order of magnitudes have to be same. If the left hand side is order of magnitude 1, the right hand side also has to be order of magnitude 1. Right? So that means that if del square u prime del y squared prime is 1 over delta squared, then mu over rho u infinity L has to be delta squared. Order of magnitude. Right? So which is what I'm writing here. The next equation, the inertia and viscous terms must balance out. Therefore, mu over rho u infinity L should be order of delta prime squared. Okay. So now let's go back to y direction, y equation again. So this is delta prime squared. This is delta prime. This is 1 over delta prime. ठीक है भाई delta prime cut कर दो. But then what happens? The order of magnitude of all the terms in the y direction is delta prime. So every term in the y direction, the forces are much, much smaller compared to the ones in the x direction. So therefore, we can completely neglect the momentum equation or the Navier-Stokes equation in the y direction and solve only for the x equation, which means we are not even concerned. Okay, assumptions was, if I actually now put a velocity meter inside the boundary layer and try to measure, I'm going to measure some component of v. Let me make it very clear, maybe very, very small. But through order of magnitude analysis, that is very, very negligible. Let's not bother about that. Even if I neglect that small v component, it's okay. I cannot beyond a certain point because there's a fluctuating term and you know about turbulence. But as of now, that is what it is. So we are only going to be concerned, with the x momentum equation. Okay, u del x plus v del y equals to nu or mu by rho del square u del x del square u del y squared. Okay. Acha, one more thing, sorry. You may ask me what happened to the pressure term, right? Because I went to the second alternate derivation first. See, minus del p del y has to, if everything order of magnitude is very, very small, then del p del y is also very, very small, tending to 0. So p is only a function of px. Okay, if there is no y, if there is no velocity in the y direction, what is the question of pressure variation in y direction, right? So p is only a function of x. Okay, but then think about it. You are saying that there is no pressure. If this is my plate and I take this point in the y direction, you are saying there is no pressure variation. So basically, the pressure at the surface is equal to pressure 1 meter away. But in the inviscid region, away from the boundary layer, what is the governing equation? P plus rho u infinity square equals to constant, right? If there are no viscous force, that's Bernoulli's equation, isn't it? Which means del P del X is also 0. Okay. So if there is no variation in the of pressure in the x direction away from the boundary layer, and there is also no variation of pressure in the y direction, it means that inside the boundary layer also dp dx equal to 0. Okay. So that's why the pressure term gets dropped, that's why I did not include it in the alternate derivation. Okay. Any questions so far? Ratul, is it clear? Ratul or Rahul?
Yes, sir. Ratul, sir.
Okay, Ratul. Okay. All right. Okay. Now the next thing is, this is very important. This mu by rho u infinity L is of the order of delta prime square, which means delta prime. Look at it. What is mu by rho u infinity L? You have probably recognized it already. This is exactly the inverse of Reynolds number. Reynolds number is rho u infinity L by mu. So which means the boundary layer, or the non-dimensional boundary layer, delta prime or delta over L, scales as 1 over square root of the Reynolds number. right? So if that is the case, then v, the velocity in the y direction, also scales as u infinity divided by 1 over root of the Reynolds number. Okay, that's not important. But what about the shear force tau, or the shear stress tau mu del u del y? You can do an order of magnitude analysis, do the same things, and you get it that it also varies as rho u infinity squared Reynolds to the power minus half. And this, my friends, you have learned before. Right? So, and we define something called a skin friction coefficient, SFX, as the shear stress divided by half rho u infinity square. Okay? And that has to vary as the square inverse of the square root of Reynolds number. Okay? So, see, these are mathematical equations, but think about it physically. First thing, why are we solving all this? What is it? What is the parameter of interest to us? If you think of a practical situation, the parameter of interest is that how much is the viscous force acting on the fluid, because that is the flow resistance, as a result of which I need to give enough pressure or enough inertial, whatever, the fluid needs to have enough energy at the upstream location in order to overcome this flow resistance. Okay. See, later on when we go to force convection, it will be the same thing, but except that the fluid is also, apart from velocity, is also going to come at a temperature of, let us say, ambient, and this plate is going to be heated. And there, my parameter of interest is going to be that what is the rate of heat transfer from the plate to this fluid. That is very clear. I need to know how effectively can I cool that plate. So from the practical point of view, that is very clear to me from heat transfer. Similarly, for fluid mechanics, the parameter of interest to a designer, to an engineer, is the viscous force, the drag force, which will be the shear stress that we are calculating times the area. That is the flow resistance that the fluid is going to face. So all this boundary layer, what is boundary layer, how much is Reynolds number, how much is the boundary layer thickness, blah, 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 these are all okay from an academic point of view, from a theoretical point of view. I'm not saying they're useless. They are very, very useful, important. But finally, when you go on the field, what people will ask is, why, how much is the force exerted? Okay. This force can be shear, this force that is acting on the surface. Or if it is flow across a cylinder, how much is the force being exerted on this cylinder by this incoming flow? That is what rotates a wind turbine, isn't it? Or any turbine blade, for example. So from fluid mechanics of view, it's the shear force which is important, which we non-dimensionalize and say there's skin friction coefficient. Okay, fine. Shear force, then shear stress, then skin friction coefficient, blah, blah, blah. Now, skin friction coefficient. Okay, two more things. If you look at this delta varies as the square root of length, which means my boundary layer thickness increases as I move along the streamwise direction. Increases at the rate of square root of x. So that's why it's a parabolic profile. Delta is proportional to x to the power half. Yeah, multiplied by nu u infinity, those are constants. Boundary layer increases. Boundary layer thickness increases. Okay. If the boundary layer thickness increases, as you are seeing here, what does it mean in terms of shear force? Okay. Before that, we need to ask, okay, if boundary layer thickness increases, it means that at the beginning, the velocity changes from 0 to u infinity over a smaller thickness, and as I go downstream, that change happens over a larger thickness. So which means the gradient of the velocity at the surface is steeper at lower values of x compared to higher values of x, which is what I've tried to show by drawing these profiles here. The del u del x is less at higher values of x. Del u del y, sorry, is less at higher values of x compared to lower values of x. Now, if del u del y is high, it means my tau, the shear stress, is high, because shear stress is mu del u del y. So shear stress is higher at upstream locations and reduces as you move along the flow direction. Keep that in mind. This is the practical thing. The shear stress decreases as you flow along the streamwise direction. The boundary layer thickness increases as you flow along the streamwise direction. For a flat plate, that boundary layer thickness increase is proportional to x to the power half. The shear force is proportional to x to the power minus half. Okay, please keep this in mind. This is very, very practical information. Okay. Okay, quickly, any questions? After this was the similarity analysis. Okay, this is just a trick. Because of this trick, I mean, this is, and once we know, we can say, okay, assume eta equals to y by x Reynolds to the power half, etc. But for the person who first time came up with this, you have to basically bow your heads down to him. That person's name is Blasius. He was a student of Ludwig Prandtl. This whole boundary layer theory, the father of boundary layer theory, is Prandtl. Blasius was a student, and he solved it and came up with this equation for Navier-Stokes, gave this analytical solution for Navier-Stokes, which also has a bit of numerics, because this ODE, f triple prime plus f double prime equal to 0, cannot be solved analytically. So he got this numerical expression and finally gave us this value, that the skin friction coefficient is 0.664 Reynolds to the power minus half. 0.664 Reynolds to the power minus half. We got this Reynolds to the power minus half just through scaling analysis. And I'm a big fan of scaling analysis. Okay, you probably won't find this approach in many textbooks, but I'm a big fan of this because it gives you so much information. It's so powerful. Just order of magnitude analysis told you exactly how this dependence is going to be. Yes, it scales as I don't know the coefficient in front. But other than that, I know. So the skin friction coefficient turns out to be 0.664 Reynolds to the power minus half. Now this is, of course, it's a varying along the x direction, actually x to the power minus half. What is the total average shear stress? That would be the length average 1 over L times integral tau dx from 0 to L. Okay, if you do that, you will get it as just twice of that, 1.328 Reynolds to the power minus half along the entire length. But this Reynolds is not at that particular location, but the entire length. So if I have a total plate of length capital L, the average skin friction coefficient is given by 1.328 times Reynolds assuming this total length as the length scale to the power minus half. The other thing this analytical solution gave was, remember, delta over x was delta prime was scaling as 1 over Reynolds to the power x minus Reynolds to the power x, or delta was scaling as x divided by root over Reynolds to the power x minus x. That coefficient is 5, actually 4.92. So this is also something you have learned before, that if I ask you, if I give you the total, if I give you the velocity and ask you that, let us say for a 1 meter plate, this is the free stream velocity of air, etc., etc. The viscosity is so much, density is so much. Can you tell me what is the boundary layer thickness at 0.2 meters? You can use this relation and give that to me. Delta over x is 5 divided by root over Reynolds x, with x as the length scale, that is. Okay. If you take x to the other side and you have an x in Reynolds number, you see here that delta actually is proportional to x to the power half. Okay. So scaling analysis gave that to us, except the coefficient 5, which came from analytical solution. Okay. 10:50. Let's move on. I think there was a question Moody chart as well. But before that, now if you consider this flow over a flat plate beyond a point, what happens? So when we say v equal to 0, means that it is just, there is x equal to 0, then x equal to probably 0.01 u infinity, 0.1 u infinity, 0.5 u infinity. So if you go vertically upwards from this x along the y direction, at every point is like a laminates, right? It's like layers of fluid flowing at gradually increasing velocity. Okay, but beyond the point, what happens is that characteristic, this laminar flow, exactly parallel layers, that changes because of certain external forces, actions, what is called flow instabilities, and you have what is called turbulent flow. If you take for example, if you light a, what is called an incense stick, okay, and if you follow the streak, you will see that initially this smoke that is coming out is moving up, in a straight line, but then slightly starts wavering, and then you have all these what we call turbulence. Okay, all these wavy patterns, etc. Okay, so that flow here. So what happens beyond a certain length, beyond a certain distance, critical distance xc, the flow starts getting transition from laminar to turbulent. Okay, so that transition Reynolds number for a flat plate is given as 3 into 10 to the power 5. So for a given velocity and fluid, you can find out that what should be that length, transition length xc. Now this turbulence, what happens is, because of turbulence, two things happen. The skin friction goes up. It's a penalty. But later on, we will see heat transfer also goes up. Well, I take back my word. I said it's a penalty, not always. If your goal is to move something because of the forces exerted, then it's not a penalty. That's what you need. But otherwise, if you're trying to flow and this is actually an obstruction, yes, turbulence leads to higher drag coefficients and drag forces. But it also helps in improving heat transfer. Okay, so you gain something, you lose something, you gain something. See, it's always a balancing act. Life, anything in life is an optimization problem. Keep that in mind. Okay, so you gain something, you lose something. So it becomes laminar to turbulent. So there may be cases that I want to make this flow turbulent right from the beginning. So what people do is they put some kind of a disturbance right at the beginning itself, which is called tripping the boundary layer. So if you make that edge rugged, rough, or put some kind of an obstruction, okay, then it is going to what we call trip the boundary layer. the flow becomes turbulent right from the beginning. So that is, we are artificially introducing turbulence, but naturally, if you let the flow develop, then it is going to get turbulent after a certain distance, which can be calculated using a transition Reynolds number of 3 into 10 to the power 5. Okay. Now, for turbulent flow, analytical solutions become difficult, even with all kind of simplifications. So, a correlation based on large number of experimental data is given here for the skin friction coefficient. 0.0592 Reynolds to the power minus 1/5. Previous one, what happened? Reynolds to the power minus half. This is Reynolds to the power minus 1/5. Right? So, what would be the average heat drag coefficient? You will have to calculate in this manner. You have to consider it to be laminar till the transition length and then turbulent. This is in friends, this is in contrast with what you have learned for flow inside a pipe. You have learned that if the Reynolds number with the diameter of the pipe as the length, if that exceeds 2000, it's turbulent fluids, then it's turbulent right from the beginning. But for laminar flow, for flow over a flat plate, unless you artificially introduce turbulence, it is always laminar followed by turbulent. Okay, laminar followed by turbulent. Please keep that in mind. Okay, 10:55 already, but please give me 2 minutes to tell you what is Moody chart. For internal flow, if you want to move fluid through a pipe, again, it's pressure driven flow. The pressure at the inlet has to be larger than at the outlet. Otherwise, it is not going. Why? Because the walls are going to try to stop the fluid. There will be viscous forces. And you will initially need that pressure gradient to overcome the viscous forces. Okay. So how do we get that? Here again, you have learned all this. There's something called friction coefficient F. The skin friction coefficient, this is called friction factor F. Okay. This friction factor is again dependent on, for if it's a smooth pipe and laminar flow, it's dependent on Reynolds number. But if it's turbulent flow, it depends on Reynolds number plus what is called the roughness parameter. It depends on the surface finish of the pipe. So that's where for Reynolds number, for laminar flow, many a times you can get something. The friction factor is 64 by Reynolds number. Okay, but for turbulent flow, can I open the image? Open image. Sorry. This is how Moody diagram looks like. I know the resolution really went bad, but let me use some other. This looks better. Okay. So the Moody chart is given by the friction factor on the y direction and the Reynolds number in the logarithmic scale in the x direction. Okay. So as you can see that in the laminar range, the friction factor, it's a straight line. If you plot it against log, it's a straight line. Okay. And if you plot it, it comes to be 64 by Reynolds number. If you had plotted in the regular scale, not the logarithmic scale, it would have been a rectangular hyperbola, right? But here, because you have done it in logarithmic scale, it is -1. Okay. Now, after that, there's a transition region where it becomes a little hazy, mushy, etc. And then what you do is, if you come to the turbulent region, you see that it depends on number one Reynolds number. It reduces with Reynolds number, definitely. But there is also another parameter, which is known as the relative roughness epsilon, which is given by a roughness, nothing is smooth, right? So there is an average size of the protrusions, that over the diameter of the pipe. So that relative roughness, so higher the roughness, higher is the friction factor. Okay, so this is called Moody chart. Vatsalya, clear?
Yes, sir.
And Moody chart is based on, has been derived based on a large, large sample set of experimental data from different sources. Okay. Now, this friction factor, however, please keep that in mind. You have to be consistent. Okay, the friction factor, the way I get is, we call it the Darcy-Weisbach factor. That is given by 64 by Reynolds number. Okay, but there is another school of thought which considers it to be 16 over Reynolds number. Okay, doesn't matter, the shape of the curves do not change, the values change. So you have to keep that in mind. What happens is, it really depends on how you define it. Some people define it as dpdz times AC, some people define it as 4 dpdz by E. But finally, what happens is that delta P is actually F L by D rho U squared, rho V squared, or U squared by 2. FL by D rho V squared by 2 if you are considering 64 by Reynolds number. If you are considering 16 by Reynolds number, it is 4 FL by D rho V squared by 2. Okay. Finally, the pressure, we use friction factor to calculate pressure drop, and that remains the same. Okay, there's some chains correlation, etc. It's okay. I just given to you, but if Moody chart is available with us, we will use Moody chart. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We will meet again on Wednesday, and we will start with force convection over external surfaces. Internal flows, we will again recap when we come to internal flows in force convection. Okay. Thank you very much. And again, as usual, I'm going to stay back for some time. Let me stop sharing. And if you have any questions, please ask me. I'm here for another 5-7 minutes. Otherwise, have a good day and see you again on Wednesday, 8 a.m.